I first met Stuart and Todd back in Shawshank when they were battling all kinds of trouble, long before they battled with bits of rubber. Listen now to the tale of another kind of life on the inside, and then get busy making.
So we have an interesting episode this week. I say this week like it comes out every week. Like I can be relied upon to fucking get that shit together. It's been a busy
It will be
year,
this week. It will be this week.
This will come out this week. But me
and
saying
we've still
this
got
week's
some
episode,
good stuff in the can that we haven't gotten out yet.
Yes, well, there's a couple that are there
piling up.
Yes, and they're kind of rough edited as well. So I've got to get onto those. It's been mad, but yeah, we'll do those next. But the ones that we recorded before are nearly finished up, and we just need them to be approved. This is the burden of doing the podcast: is you have to do it, and then just because of the way we do things, we make sure that the person who's in it listens to it before we release it. So the final editor,
we want to make sure everybody's happy.
Yeah,
on the same page.
It's tricky if you can't get hold of that person or they're busy or whatever. So we're at the mercy of when they can do that. So, and I in my the capacity, I haven't pushed because I've been very busy myself. So I'm a bit slow on that front.
Yeah,
but I'll crack on.
Yeah, well, I've finally made a decision after the episode we just recorded.
Uh-huh.
When I grow up, I want to be Bill Corso.
Yeah, man, he's awesome.
Oh my God!
So yeah, we had a good 2-hour chat with Bill Corso. Now, for those of you who don't know Bill Corso, shame on you. He's a makeup designer with a very extensive credit list. You'll probably know him best. You'll know him best from Deadpool, and he was makeup designer on Deadpool. He was Jim Carrey's makeup designer for Lemony Snicket,
for which he won an Academy Award.
Because his work is not sloppy. But the thing about Bill is he's been doing it a while, and he's worked in the workshop making stuff. He's now mostly on set as a designer, so he has a very extensive experience of all aspects, and I think that makes him very uniquely placed to be able to comment on all those things, because a lot of the people that we talk to have they work in one area or they're one thing, but he's gone all the way through from from the workshop stuff, the backroom boy stuff, which that's you and I are basically, that's our environment. That's where you feel safest, up to being on set. And not everybody enjoys being on set or flourishes on set, but he seems to have done both. But he seems to have taken to being on set, and so
and he's highly in demand. I mean, he's Harrison Ford's personal makeup artist. He works with Jim Carrey, Ryan Reynolds, Josh Brolin. I mean, the list goes on, and not just actors, A-list actors, but A-list makeup folk as well.
Yeah.
Name somebody who you think is the shit, and Bill's worked with them.
Absolutely. And what is interesting as well, I looked through a lot of the IMDb credits, you'll see like a lot of the people he has are the same people, like Richie Alonso and stuff. I'll get the same good people back, because that's the best kind of shorthand. If you work with someone and you know them for a long time and you work well, why wouldn't you expedite everything? Given that all the stuff that can happen to you and go wrong is likely to do so, it makes sense.
And Richie's one of those guys that
together.
People working in the business know who Richie Alonso is, but anyone outside, who's that? But Richie Alonso is phenomenal.
Yeah,
it's like Matt Rose. He's one of those guys that everybody who is at the top of their game wants on their team, because he's going to just make them look better.
Yeah, it's incredible. And you do get that thing of these kind of almost anonymous sort of people who continually churn out amazing stuff and make these things happen. And often there's someone gets known for something, or they get credit for something, and there's a huge team underneath them that just are not as well known, or they don't have the same reach. And Bill's very good at pointing out these things.
It's something we talked about in the episode, is not everybody enjoys being in the limelight. They prefer to be unseen, but doing the best work that they can.
Yeah. Although sometimes
some people thrive in that environment, others don't.
Yeah. But sometimes people that do deserve more credit don't get a look in because they don't fit what people think. Often I think that's the case. I think the responsibility to that is a lot of it is down to producers who are filming behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah.
And they'll gravitate towards someone that they think looks good on camera, even if they've only showed up for that day to help out. That's happened to me before on jobs where, like, you know, somebody that looks good, you know, and maybe is found attractive by the presenter is the one that they ask. It's like, she's just here today, man. Yeah. And somebody that's been working right next to him, that's been on the job for 6 months, no one thinks to look at that guy because he looks like a piece of shit, because guess what? He's been working 18 hours a day for the past 6 months to make this fucking thing happen. But
Yeah.
but hey, that's why we have a podcast, right? So we can talk about these things and promote the right people. But Bill's very good at you know, mentioning these people and pointing out the stuff, and it's some very interesting stuff, like the whole stuff about the blob. That was fascinating, you know.
That's some good stories.
Yeah, some very good stories. So
And he's just such a nice guy.
yeah, solid. Very, very nice, and very gracious with his time as well. Very, because I always worry when when we talk to these people that, you know, we're you know, they're giving us their time, and I always make sure that, you know, it's very clear that we're sincere about what it is we're doing. We would have a conversation. It's not just a series of questions, like some kind of, you know, rinse and repeat process. You know, we kind of grasp the nettle of all that kind of stuff, and you know, he's very gracious and very nice with it. So I'm so grateful to you, Bill, that, you know, we're both, when the call finished, you and I just looked at each other, we're like, oh my God, you know, another amazingly successful kind of chat that even if nobody heard, I would still be really stoked about. So that's what these things are supposed to be about, I think, you know, excited and childlike. Ooh,
It was a great episode. Bill, thank you so much for your time and your expertise, and hope we get a chance to do it again soon. And now take a listen. Here it is.
All right. So where would you like to start?
I don't know about you, Todd. I'm quite interested in just bringing up the notion of one of the things that I think can happen on set is if people don't understand, and I had this quite recently on a job, if people don't understand what it is you do, they may not give it enough time or credit. Do you know what I mean? If you do a good job of hiding something or making something up, they don't really understand what the makeup department can do.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to talk a little bit about that. And it certainly comes into play, I think, with what you know, your digital makeup group, about correcting things. But there's a lot of things that happen in makeup that aren't necessarily obvious. And yet, so if you do a good job of hiding something, people don't necessarily understand, or they, you know, they won't necessarily give you the right amount of time to prep something because you know what it is you're trying to do.
The story I tell about that, I think it aligns, is why Dick Smith didn't get an Academy Award for The Exorcist, is because everybody thought that Max von Sydow was actually that old. Didn't realize he was wearing makeup.
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of that. I think it's actually a bigger question or conversation, only because I think a lot of it stems from I mean, you bring up Rick Baker, but Rick will be the first one to tell you he's not. And back in the old days, it was probably he didn't have the reputation yet, you know, or you know, Dick Smith or whatever. But Rick will be the first person to tell you he's not a great talker. You know, he's not a great playing the business part of it all. And, you know, he's an artist and he wants to get to work and do the work. And as you know, Steve Johnson used to be the same way, and just accept it. Just let me do my job and get out of my way. And don't realize that there's this big business there, and that there's a game you have to play. And I've always believed in part of that game is getting everybody to respect your position and your work, right? So I start, and this, why I say it's a bigger conversation, it goes to the person, goes to the artist, and the artist immediately starting a job, starting prep, the design process, and commanding a respect for what he's doing or she's doing. Because there are artists who go in and they, they don't assert themselves enough. They don't apply themselves properly to a certain project, and they may get kind of run over or dismissed as, you know, let's face it, insignificant. And there are some of us who work as hard at that part of it, you know, as the projection of our craft than the craft itself sometimes, yes, you could be doing the simplest thing, but I go out of my way on jobs to let everybody know right from the beginning that whatever I do is going to be really important and as important to the production as the DP, So when I'm on set, and the way I present myself and present our department, most people think I'm the producer, or I'm obviously somebody very important, even people who don't know us, and so when I get involved in something, or you go look at something, it must be important, and you set a standard from the very beginning with the ADs and with the production and the producers, and there's a way of doing it that no matter what you do, it's taken seriously, and not dismissed. And I don't think, and that's something I think that's got to be taught to people, or you learn it obviously through experience, or you see somebody who does command that presence or that respect, has the presence, commands the respect, and you go, wow. Now, I think the person that exemplified that was Stan Winston. I think Stan could have been putting a fake nose on somebody, but Stan was like, he made sure he was the most important, the biggest person on that set, and I think there are guys like, I think Jeff Dawn, is that way. I think Christian Tinsley is that way. There are people who kind of, they set the standard right out of the gate and say, okay, here's what we're doing. Here's what I'm going to be doing. I respect you, respect what I'm doing, give me my time, and the second that doesn't happen, you let them know. Like, let's not forget. So, it surprises me sometimes on jobs where, we're being treated as well as we are. And I've been told back, they go, well, look how professional you guys are. I mean, look how, you guys just seem important, regardless of what you're doing. Could be regular makeup. Mm-hmm. And yet there are those people. Donald Moat is a great example. Donald commands he has a presence, and he commands a respect with the production and with the studio and whoever he's working with, very well respected. And sadly, I think over the years, there's a lot of people practicing our craft that, whether they don't have that capability or they don't try, to have that capability, and they have a lot of problems because of it, So I always try to, whenever I have work with people, you try to, instill that in people. Look, you're going to go off on your own jobs, and I have assistants or interns, and, when you go off and one day, start running shows and don't forget us little people, be respectful to everyone and command that respect. Don't demand it, but be the type of person that you would want to work with. It's amazing how well that works in our business.
Well, that's great advice, and I think it requires a conscious effort on our part, because I think as artists, a lot of us, or if not most of us, are somewhat introverted and self-conscious about things, and a little on the timid side, and it requires digging deep and finding something that you're not accustomed to wielding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are many people in our business who, let's say, one of I think the greatest artists our business has ever seen, Matt Rose. And Matt, I'm sure would say he was not a people person, he, didn't become a makeup artist, although he was a brilliant makeup artist, because he couldn't stand actors, talk to Kazu. He'll tell you the same thing. He has a problem, with actors or with the, the rigors of a production, and how people are, just doesn't want to deal with it. He's an artist, wants to do his work and just leave, it is hard for some people. There is a reason why certain designers have done well, or department heads and supervisors, because those are the people who know how to play that part of the game. It is a very small group that can do both. I know great designer department heads and supervisors who, I don't know if I'd put them at the top of our artistic pile, but yet they do that job really well, and they hire well, I'll hire, I've always said, it's like, I want to hire people better than me because it's only going to make me look better. You hire up, so they're going to hire the best, artists and sculptors or applicators or, when I did Deadpool 2, and I realized on Deadpool 1, I'd done so much stuff myself. It was kind of overwhelming. And Deadpool 2 had so much more work. I was like, I want to find a painter who's way better than me. I want to find, makeup artists who are better than me, to do some of this other stuff, and that's the job of a good, that's the position of a good boss, a good supervisor. You're there to, to stack the deck in your favor. It's hard when on smaller jobs where it's just you, or it's just, the quiet guy, or, or like, again, working all those years for Steve Johnson, it was like Steve was so focused on making whatever they were doing as good as it could possibly be, and pushing the envelope and breaking out of the box. And he was so focused on that production and the business side of it was, in his words, fuck those guys, fuck them. And to be like, well, yeah, but you can't exactly say that, because I'd usually be the one dealing with them, sure. And so that's where I learned that, okay, there's another side to this. And in order for them to respect us and let us do that work, I have to play this other game. So I spent so much of my time on all those jobs with Steve, refining that talent, that became, and I realized how important that was, that it's wound up benefiting me. But you're right, Todd, you see, it's some people are not capable of it. And I've seen incredibly talented artists do jobs and just get bulldozed because they lack that, standing up for themselves or asserting themselves. And it's frustrating. I mean, I've even gone out of my way to say, like, I'll call somebody, and I'll have a conversation for you, because you shouldn't be treated that way, and they don't appreciate what you're doing. It's a hard part of our business. And sadly, with the more younger and experienced filmmakers, it becomes even more crucial, I think, and beneficial to somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. You gotta stand up for yourself. What you were just saying is kind of similar to, I ran a 99 seat equity theater in Hollywood in the early 90s. I was the producing director, and my partner was the artistic director. He would bring productions in, and he had a way of kind of turning people off. And so my job was he'd bring them in, and my job was to keep them and get them to come back.
It's good. You learn balance, right, Stuart? I mean, you learn it, especially at your leads, or unless you're somebody just stuck in a corner working on something, the people standing out in front, the lead singers, you want a good balance. Sometimes, well, this guy's abrasive. Well, this guy, maybe he or she won't be abrasive. Like you learn to, sometimes the better shows are the people that you work for that are good at that stuff.
Yes.
They're not being beaten down.
Yeah.
They've learned how to balance it somehow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's really good advice just to bring that up, as a thing that it's a thing you have to actively do, just like anything else. I think, the thing is when you start out, you're unlikely to be given like, a top job, you'll be assisting somebody else in some capacity. So you get a chance to see how the people who are assessing themselves are doing it, and to be aware that this is something you need to do if you want to be in their position. And so you can kind of play at it a little bit, or just, try and emphasize in whatever capacity you're able to get a feel for it. Because I think it's that discomfort that people dislike. Especially, I was speaking to students recently, and a lot of them at a college, the younger generation, it's a different kind of atmosphere for them, I think. And it's their feelings are valid, but they've got to understand, obviously, that if they're going to be hired, like you say, it's down to you defending your position from the outset by starting out by being competent at what you do, and then defending it, rather not in an aggressive way, but you just, like, you wouldn't let someone just take your wallet or something.
Well, we have also earned that. I mean, we've been in the business long enough where we've earned the right to, assert ourselves and say, look, I have a lot of experience. I know what I'm talking about. Trust me when I say I'm working, where I'm going to do the best work I can for you. And I respect your job. Please respect what we're doing. It's harder for the younger generation, this particular generation right now, who has a very serious sense of entitlement. And they expect that they'll get that, right out of the gate. And we know, because we started from the bottom, as much talent as I thought I had when I started, I found myself, I was seaming at Rick Baker's, and doing it badly sometimes. So, you learn,
Sure.
you get beaten down, and you learn the right way to do things. And you make a lot of mistakes. And I was very grateful for, the steps it took me to get to where I am. A lot of people in today's climate with the internet and social media and thinking that they painted a bunch of faces and now they're ready for the big time. They don't understand, the process that we went through to get to the mindset that we can now be in the industry and deal with it and garner respect.
Well, that entitlement generation is now, it's interesting that they feel that, yet they don't have the thick skin that comes with the criticism they're invariably going to get, because they don't know as much as they think they do.
I think it's a tough one. I mean, there are entitled people, but there are also people, I think, who are nervous and worried about stuff. And that comes from just not knowing your job well enough. We're talking about people that are competent at what they do, who then not refuse to defend it, but they're not maybe made of that material that can. And I think that's where you get that natural pecking order. You get the people that can, and we've all known it. There are people I work with who I started out with who are now, running shows, because they're capable of doing that. And I know I'm not like that, and I'm happy with my position. You know what I mean? I'm happy to not be that, but I know that structure has to exist in order to provide work for me. Do you know what I mean? I couldn't work on Game of Thrones unless Barry Gow was, tough enough to have meetings. Him and Sarah would defend budgets and clear things, and that gives 25 people a job, and that has to be that way.
And look, Barry's been at this a long time, right? I mean, he worked his way up just like you. He was in the shop. He was a shop guy, and he worked his way up, and got to that point where now he, you get a modicum of success, and it allows you to get that respect and he's he obviously not one of them, but there are people, like I said, at the top who may not be the best artists, but they're so good at that, and when people always ask for me for advice, or I want to get into business, and what do you think, and what can you recommend? It's like, well, yes, practice everything, try to get really good at the art. But number one is people, learn how to be with people, learn how to, be respectful, and to carry yourself in a way that you're very professional and the business. And that's a lot of that comes from experience,
and not having sort of meltdowns on social media on a regular basis is that kind of stuff as well, which I see people. And then the next week is like, have you got any work? Like, no, I don't want it near my tool shop. I think that's true. Because it doesn't seem obvious. And I think that's the thing. I think anything that you were going to pursue to any degree, if you want to be seriously successful, those are the people you're up against. Those would be your peers. So you would have to be of a, and I think it's a call to arms to, muscle up and toughen up if you want to do it.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to be
start early, like
on
you would
set,
with,
if you're going to be working on set, we as makeup artists, we spend more time around actors than anybody else on the crew.
Yeah. But it is that thing of like,
and if you can't have a rapport, you gotta rethink your game plan.
I think
people business.
Yeah, I think it's got to be fostered as well. But if you're going to learn how to do a Marcel wave or something, you also need to know how to carry yourself as well. And some people have been more natural than others, and that may be a hard fact that's going to limit how far you get in the business. Because if you can't run a shop, then you're going to be at a certain level, and you've got to be happy, like I am, and I'm happy with where I am. I don't feel like a jilted boss, because I'm not of that material, and that's fine. I'm not frustrated by that. So
it's sometimes not an enviable position. I mean, a lot of people would want the misery. I remember Rick Baker telling me when, we were I'd worked my way up. I was hired. I was the last sculptor hired on Gremlins 2. And I sculpted a pair of ears, sculpted some, like I was sculpting, everything was really done. And I was just sculpting like parts, like extra additional parts, big ears, little ears, all sorts of things to try to make the background Gremlins different, fins, all sorts of weird things. And then it was like, well, then, work on these display pieces and, paint a couple of these and let's see how you do there. And then we'll put you in seaming and then we'll put you over, I was like everywhere. Then we'll try you in painting. So then I started painting and then, and then eventually Aaron Sims and I started painting everything. Like we were painting, if it wasn't a lead character, all the lead characters were painted by their lead artists. Aaron and I painted almost everything else. Like all the, thousands of Gremlins we painted, just the two of us in a room. And by the end, and then when it got to, okay, we're going to start, Rick made a deal for us to puppeteer on set. Those of the shop who were, savvy enough or had the talent, for puppeteering. And, he made some kind of deal with SAG, because obviously it was like, we're going to need hundreds of SAG puppeteers and production was like freaking out. And Rick was like, well, maybe there's a loophole that my crew can come in and puppeteer a lot of, you have lead puppeteers for all SAG, but then all the background could maybe be some of our shop people. And so he made this deal. So we had all these classes to see who was a good puppeteer. And I had worked my way up through that to be one of the lead puppeteers. Cause in my other life, I would have worked at Henson's, I would love to have been a Muppeteer. And I got this opportunity I was presented with an opportunity to go off and do my own show, which, as a kid and growing up and idolizing Rick Baker and Rob Bottin and all these guys who did these shows. And I wanted to be that. That's what I wanted. I wanted my own shop and I wanted the special makeup effects dream. And here I'm getting presented with this opportunity to run a show, which in my eyes was a huge show with lots of creatures and prosthetics. And it was called The Boneyard. It was horrible, but it was written and directed by James Cummings, who had done House and, all the effects for House and had worked on The Thing. And he was just a lovely guy, James, and very talented. Strange Invaders, he got great style and he really wanted to be a writer director. So he had written this script and I had done a couple of little things for him before I worked at Rick's, and he wanted me to run the show, design it and run it. And I was just blown away. Here was my big chance. And I was, 20 going on 21. And I'd set like a timeline for myself, like, by 21, Rob Bottin was 21 when he did The Howling. So like, I have to be, I got to do a show. So here is my chance to, meet my, achieve my goal and my dream. And Rick pulled me in and I told him, and he pulled me into the office and he sat me down and he, like sitting on the desk, and he goes, you don't want to do this. And he goes, look, you got a good job here. You're going to be one of the lead. We already been on set puppeteering because you're like you become one of the lead guys. You're really great. He goes, you're going to hate doing your own show. You're going to, trust me, it's not what it's, made out to be. It's going to be miserable. You're going to, it's, here you have no responsibility. You just get to play and make stuff and play. And he goes, and I take all the shit. He goes, you're going to wind up, realizing it's not what you are dreaming. And I'm like, and of course, I'm like, yes, but I have to do it. Like, that's my thing. I have to do it. You did it. I'm sure you put up with all that bullshit. And so he said, okay, you're never going to work for me again. Oh yeah. No, he was mad. I mean, and Rick, just being Rick, obviously he's very sarcastic. And he goes, fine. I don't ever want to see you again. So, and then he laughed and I was just like, all right. And he's good luck. You're going to hate it. And so I did it. And truth be told, it was a nightmare. And I loved half of it. I hated the second half of it. My whole crew quit. I almost died from the pneumonia. It was horrible. It was horrible, horrible, horrible. Probably as bad as it could get. But yet I learned so much. I learned maybe I don't want to run a shop. Because I did. We opened up a whole new shop in South Carolina North Carolina, sorry. We opened up a shop, we staffed it. The very first person I hired was Richie Alonso, because I'd worked with Richie on The Blob. And I brought in all these guys from different, I had 15 people. I hired people from Henson's in New York and had a full shop of people, and we made all this crazy stuff. But it was an incredible learning experience, but a nightmare. And when I went back to LA, we were there for 6-7 months. And I moved to North Carolina to do it. The first person I made an appointment to see was Rick, and told him that he was right and that it was really hard. It was a nightmare, and everybody quit, and everything that I wanted was destroyed, and every cliched bad effects thing that could go wrong went wrong, I was like, oh my God, our director was a makeup effects guy, right? So nobody knows more of makeup effects than this guy. And we made a giant 12-foot tall werewolf poodle monster. But like you would make a giant werewolf, it was my howling werewolf, and it was a poodle, and it was just awesome.
I remember seeing this in Fangoria.
yeah. And we made these Tom Williamson maybe made these gorgeous hand mechanisms, hand mechanisms, these giant paws, that were like the American werewolf paws, and they spread, and they fantastic, they were just awesome. The very first shot, they shot him breaking through a door, and they tried to pre-score the door, didn't work. So, and I'm begging and pleading, please don't make this the first shot. I don't want the hands to get destroyed. We have to, and he's like, we have to do it. And he was stressed. And of course they completely destroyed our beautiful hand mechanisms that never worked again in the very first shot. So you never see them work in the movie, and half the movie, he's just like floppy. And every day more shit like that. And so again, I laughed and I told Rick, and I go, you were right, it was crazy, a nightmare, and I would have had much more fun in Gremlins. I have one good picture of me on set with Rick and Joe Dante. That's my good memory. But to our point, I learned so much getting thrown into that fire of what I wanted to do, what I didn't want to do. I backed off that dream real quick for years. I went to work for Steve. I literally went to, I don't know if I want to do that now. Do I want to open up a shop and come back and be that guy? And that was hard. And I would, the only time I could do my work was 4:00 in the morning when everybody was gone, and I would sculpt stuff. And I'm like, this is miserable. So I got hired by Steve, and for 8 years, I was just Steve's, I'd paint and sculpt and just do, shop stuff. And slowly but surely towards the end, he started letting me run shows, and he would go off and do something, and I would just be the guy. And here I am now running a shop again. But it was a big shop with a lot of people and multiple shows going on. And I was overseeing everything. And I was like, God, I'm doing it again, and I'm not really liking it. I'm not liking I'm the Rick Baker guy, or I'm the Steve Johnson guy. And, we got, that's when The Stand happened, and we got the opportunity. I was doing the effects, doing all the prosthetics, and we went on set, and it was a wonderful experience. And a year later, The Shining happened. And it was at that point I realized, do I want to be Rick Baker? Do I want to be Steve Johnson? I want to run the big shop and have all the guys and the drama and the, this and the that or do I love being on set? And do I love applying the makeups? And do I love that? Because, there's 6 months of the shop, and then there's a week of the set, there's that disconnect. And the set is really where I love. And I looked at, so I shifted my focus at that point from, is that my dream? Or look at somebody like V Neal, and what she was doing. And V's winning Oscars and everything. She's never stepped foot in a shop. She's not a shop person. She's just applying makeups on set and running shows and doing makeup, which ultimately was my first love, of course. Corso stage makeup book. And, that's, that was it. And I thought maybe I'm shifting what I want to do and focus on that. And so I begged the director, Mick Garris of The Shining, who we'd done The Stand with, can I run the whole show? I've never done it before, but I think I could department head and run the whole show. And I'll hire somebody to do the female lead, but there's so much effects in the movie. It makes more sense for me to run the show and do the effects and everything. And he let me do it. That was my first show.
Amazing.
And we won Emmys for it, and it worked out great. And then it just snowballed from there. And eventually, like, you know, V hired me to go do a couple of things with her. And I eventually told Steve, I'm like, I'm done. I'm out of the shop, and I'm just going to do this. This is what I want to do. And that was it.
The
And
stress level is different. You know, some people thrive on stress, and not many artists do.
Yeah. The stress level in the shop. Yeah. The stress level in the shop. Well, now, to be fair, I was working for Steve, who's, and I love him like a brother, and he's one of the most amazing artists I've ever met in my life. And there's nothing I did that he didn't make better, which used to piss me off. But he would, the stress level was really high, and it would drive me crazy at some point. And there's a lot of stress on set, no mistake. But it's a different kind of stress, like you said. And I can handle that stress. Like, I feel more in control. In the shop, there was too many other things that were out of my control. My last big effects job for Steve was really what did me in. And I'm like, that's it, I'm done. And that was Species. We were doing the female Giger alien, designed by Giger, which I then redesigned to make it practical, to actually like make it buildable. It's really funny. If you ever looked at the Making of Species book, it's like a Giger book, beautiful. It's got like the pink cover and everything. I had redrew a lot of his drawings to understand it and to show everybody what we were making, because I art directed the whole thing. And he took my drawings are in the book that he sketched over and obviously wrote his name on it. And I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. Yeah.
It's amazing. Like you said, I mean, the thing is with all of this is that, you took a punt, you took a chance, even against advice, but you had this thing you had to try. And even though it was rough, you see it through. And I think that's the important thing is it's how you respond to the circumstance, because it's very easy to find yourself in a world of hurt and go, I'm just going to drop it like a hot cake. But it's like, yeah, but you need to see it, especially if, a job, it's like, at some capacity, you're going to want to come back into the industry. So you've got to see it through. And it is how you respond to that. I think that says a lot about you,
Yeah. That perseverance and that, like I said, by the end of the show, I was the only one standing from my whole crew. It was gone. Everyone was gone. I had pneumonia, and I was on that last day, I was on set well before COVID. Like, I was just dying, I'd lost weight, and I was making sure the gag worked, and I was there with the puppet and everything. And I'm like, I'm not a quitter. I'm going to make sure that this movie, that my name's on it, I'm going to make sure everything looks cool. But it had me reassess. But the amount of wisdom and experience I got from that one job was insane,
No, you can't buy that kind of experience.
And I've been lucky. I've had a few of those, actually. My first big movie that I worked on, after doing all the little low budget, crappy things, was The Blob. And The Blob was somewhat similar in that it was at the time a very big practical effects movie. And I was hired by Lau Conway as one of the lead Blob people. There was like 7 of us in the beginning, 8 of us, I think. And then in one giant shop on Hollywood Boulevard, off of Hollywood Boulevard, and split right down the middle. It was like a 60,000 square foot shop or building. And there was a line, literally, we took a white line of tape down the center of the shop. And we were on one side, and Tony Gardner and all the makeup effects were on the other side. And Tony hired all these people that he had worked with. And so I would just sit there and I'd look over across the line and see everybody that I'd ever read about. He had everybody over there, Sean McEnroe and, Brian Wade, Mike Smithson, and, and Shannon Shea, and like all these, just the who's who of makeup effects at the time. And I was so jealous that that's where I wanted to be. And instead I was on our side playing with slime, trying to come up with what the hell the Blob was, which none of us knew. Even Lyle had no idea. He was only hired because he had just done Little Shop of Horrors, and it had tentacles, and the producers thought, well, the Blob has tentacles, he's the perfect guy, and he made this big practical thing that had tentacles, so he's the guy. And he had no idea. He had like no concept. Yeah, literally the first day his directive to everybody was, of the 8 of us, everybody had a specific position. So Dave Kinlan and Mark Citrakian were hired as the 2 mechanical designers. They were going to do tentacles and everything. It's where I met Mark, who's one of my closest friends. So he's like, okay, you guys set up a mechanical shop. We're going to make a lot of tentacles. Okay, they're done. A guy by the name of Douglas Turner, who is a great all-around effects guy. And he's like, he goes, Doug, you're going to be our liaison to Greg Jean, who's in charge of all the miniatures, the great Greg Jean. We're going to do some miniature work. You'll be responsible for coordinating with him and getting breakdowns of all the miniatures we're going to be doing. And you'll start there. Then Richie Alonso, that's where I met Richie. And he's like, Richie, Dick Smith gave me this product that I want you to get and experiment with. It was the stuff that they put in ice packs, highly toxic. It was like this jelly material. And he wanted Richie to get it and play with it and figure it out. And if it's worth pursuing, or because it looked cool. He goes, I saw some of it and it looked real stretchy and weird looking. So that was, and he said you could, and there's a scene, sculpt a maquette. There's the scene where the blob comes out of the sink and drags the guy into the sink. He goes, sculpt a little maquette of that to show what that might look like. Great. And then another guy was Dave Matherly. And I think he had Dave worked for Beekler at the time. And I think Dave sculpted something as well. Then it was me, and I was the last person. And he goes, okay, Bill. I'm like, wait, I'm so excited to hear what I'm going to do. We had like 4 months of prep, I think, before they started shooting. And he goes, Bill, there's a scene where the blob attacks a woman who's in a phone booth, and it covers the phone booth, and it crushes the phone booth and her, and then it goes on the sidewalk, and it goes into a gutter and disappears into the sewer. And I just looking at him, and I go, okay. And he goes, figure out how to do that scene. I was like, well, what is the blob? He goes, I don't know. You come up with something. Come up with 5 things and I'll pick one. That was it. That was my first day. And that was my first big experience. Like, okay, this is a big movie. This must be how it works. I love and respect
problem solving 101.
He's like a genius, right? That guy was amazing, everything he'd ever done. And so he must know what he's doing. Like I had no idea what I was doing. So that job, you can imagine how crazy, horrible that job was. And the same kind of thing. Everybody quit that job. That job had more turnover, I think, than any job in effects history. But right. By the very end of that job, which was 9 months later, after prep and shooting and post-production and all the miniature stuff, it was like 8 or 9 months. Myself and Mark Citrakian were the only 2 people who went from the very first day to the very last day.
Went the distance.
And I learned a lot.
Oh man, yeah. That's it though, isn't it? It's the way to do it. To suck that up. I mean, as well, like you see a lot of people. I see a lot of questions on forums where people are basically asking things that are like, well, you should know this if you've taken the job, or what have you done so far to try and figure it out? And when you hear a question like that, a thing like that, where you're like, just figure it out. It's like, I think this is a thing. I think a lot of people that are doing well are people that were like, stuff was dumped on the table and they stuck with it and figured it out, rather than just immediately, the first thing I'm going to do is ask everybody else, as a knee-jerk response. Yeah.
We're problem solvers, I mean, that's really what we do. And our job is to make it look cool, right? I mean, yes, we have, we have all these, the capacity of all these facets of our job: drawing, painting, sculpting, crafts, mechanics, science, mold making, there's like a million, costuming, whatever, making eyes, making teeth, there's 1,000 things we have, a capacity to do. And some of us have learned a lot of it, or most of it, hair work. And your job is to, okay, now how can I compile all this stuff and make it look cool? I mean, we've all seen people compile all that stuff and it not look cool. I mean, what we would think our job is, how can I gather all that together, make it look cool, whatever it may be, have it serve the script and the story, make the director happy, the producer happy, the actor happy. And we're not great right out of the gate. First try is not the best. Second try, sometimes not the best. Sometimes third try or fourth try. I was always impressed. One of my earliest jobs, I remember I was asked to go assist. I got a call when I was working at Steve's, and his business manager called the shop saying, I need a makeup artist who can go help one of my clients who's on a show, and he just needs somebody to babysit set for him because he's working, 24 hours a day in the shop and on set, and he's doing everything himself, and he just needs somebody to babysit and makeup. And I'm like, I'll do it. I'll go do it. So I'm told to report to this, downstage, and I'm just going to babysit this makeup so this guy can go home, get a couple hours of sleep and run foam all night and come in with another makeup. And it was Kevin Haney. And this is my first time. Well, I met Kevin. Kevin stopped by. I'll never forget. Dick Smith came to visit the Blob shop and came to visit Lyle. And so that was the first time I'd met Dick in person. I talked to him on the phone when I was like 15. I cold called him like we all did. Talked to him for like an hour. So this was my first time meeting him in person, and he brought Kevin Haney with him. And Kevin Haney was like, I don't know, he looked like he was 22 years old. Probably older than that at the time because he's older than me. But so I met Kevin before. So when I saw him this day, and he looked like he hadn't slept in a month, he told me that this makeup he was doing, and it was for a commercial or something. He had done it 5 times. He had just like resculpted it and remolded it the night before, and he applied the pieces. They were still wet, and they hadn't been baked. The molds weren't baked out. So the pieces they weren't, fluffy, they were still compressing.
Oh my God.
And he goes, just keep your eye on it. Don't let anybody touch it because it may not, it may not respond. It may not come back. And so I'm like, oh my God. I go, you need sleep, dude. And I go, I don't think you're making good decisions. And he goes, I have to finish this other makeup that's got to work tomorrow. I'm like, you need to learn how to say no to jobs. Like if you don't have enough time. But I was amazed. Like, here's a guy who I don't know. He may have won an Oscar at that point for Driving Miss Daisy. He's got a great reputation. I mean, Kevin's a great makeup artist, but I was just amazed how, here he's not satisfied. He just keeps redoing stuff. Like I go, didn't you test it? He goes, I did test it. I didn't like it. And I just kept, then I found out Kevin just redoes everything like 5 times, and, I tell everybody, even on shows that I do, and they expect it's perfection right out of the gate. And it's like, well, that's great. That's like a Hail Mary if you can do that. But, odds are you're going to learn something and you're going to adjust it and you're going to do it again. And you're going to probably want to adjust that. And, The Darkest Hour, it's probably one of the finest prosthetic makeups we've ever seen. Kazu did it 5 times. He kept resculpting it, he kept changing it, and, that's what we do. You learn and you keep, trying to better ourselves, and it never ends.
Yeah, I think if you have the mindset that what you've done is right and then it should be good, then I guess it pains you to have to consider resculpting it. But it sounds like, like Kevin Hay was doing. It's just like, no, I want perfection, and I'm not looking at the things that are done. I'm looking at what it's got to be, which is a testament of how much effort that guy's willing to put in.
It can be frustrating not only for production but for the artist as well. But I think it's really important because as artists, we're never satisfied with our work. I think that's
but you wish other people could see this and know that,
pushing us forward. Yeah, absolutely. That's one of those things that Bill was talking about, that production doesn't recognize some of what goes into getting things. What you see on set getting applied. There were lots of iterations and a lot of long sleepless nights to get to that point.
Yeah.
Well, it's true, but it's true for the more you work in the business, you realize, yes, we're artists, but I look at all the other crafts, set design and props, and they kind of do the same exact thing. They're redoing sets the night before because it's not right, and the production designer didn't like it. I mean, I don't think there's ever an effect or a gag or a prop or anything we made at Steve's that the night before it was due on set, he didn't just rip it to shreds and we started from scratch. I mean, it literally happened 9 times out of 10, and we would be redoing it. He had a wild idea. It looks like shit. It doesn't work. We got to change it all, like the day before, the night before. And we'd work all through the night, and inevitably it would be better. He'd see something, or he'd figure out the one thing it needed. And yes, they don't appreciate you, or you come in late. Why are you late? And it's like, well, we redid did it from scratch. They don't understand that. They don't appreciate that or whatever. But I would try to go out of my way sometimes and explain. It's like, look, we're trying to, you don't understand what we did. We're trying to make this as great as it can be. And shit happens, and it's hard. Every show's different, and it got to the point where that's the kind of stuff that eventually did me in, because it was just, again, the stress level is, nonstop and very high, when you do that kind of stuff. I really appreciate now the boss or the people that you meet who are, again, and maybe it's experience, or maybe it's just a thought process and a design process, that they're so meticulous and well thought out that it just kind of goes like clockwork, and the final product is great. And you're very happy to have worked on it, and it looks like you're very proud of it. And, and oddly, some of the stuff that I've done that I'm most proud of is the stuff I didn't really think too hard on, or didn't think about at all. And I just did it. And I was like, I'm pleasantly surprised. I'm like, wow, that's actually better than I could have hoped. And the stuff I stressed over and redid 5 times, I'm never happy with.
Yeah, serendipity. It's a gift when you have people, when you've got a director and a DP who get what you do and work on set to help make the makeup look as good as possible. We'll adjust camera angles to take into account that maybe this edge along the left hairline isn't quite as good as it can be. So we will shift things just a little bit so we don't see that and not have to fix it in post.
Yeah, I think it's like you were saying, Bill, earlier about, establishing early on, what you need. So I guess it would be a case of making those points early before you start filming, saying, all right, this is this material. It's going to need this kind of thing. We may have edges. What kind of lighting? This is going to affect it. And making it a point of, it's not because of me that you're going to have these considerations. Anyone who does this is going to provide these limitations. So you have to work within them. And by saying that early on, I guess you're kind of sowing the seeds for, you explain it calmly. I mean, I've done similar things with, I suppose, when I get job quotes in or something, and it's something I probably can't do, but I'll explain just so if you're going to ask people this, to quote on this, so they want a fake head or something, maybe mention whether the mouth is open or closed, or the eyes are open or closed, because you may not realize this, but the cost of eyes or not having eyes is going to make a big difference. So someone may assume it needs eyes, that kind of thing. And they're often very grateful that you've told them this, because it never occurred to them to mention it. And even it just takes 5 minutes of my time to do it, but it's the kind of thing you could do to help sow little professional seeds to kind of help your reputation.
You realize, and this goes back to our first question and conversation about putting out there and getting that that respect going. It's like you realize very quickly that it's not about us, that it's a collaborative medium, that we only look good if everybody that we interact with also looks good and does their job well. And the better we interact with people and can get the different departments to work together as a team and support each other, the better it is. It's very frustrating. You get on a job where the costume designer is working against you or not working with you, or the DP is not working with you or against you, or, it's those jobs where everybody gels and gets together. I think some of the stuff that we've all loved throughout the years that we hold at such a high level is because everybody was firing on all cylinders, American Werewolf, The Howling, The Thing, like all those movies were well designed, well made, well shot, well acted, that everything was, was just perfection, and I've seen movies where certain departments lifted up another department. I've seen movies where, the makeups were not that great, but they were shot so beautifully that they're just flawless. So that's, again, in the beginning, that's why I say in the beginning during prep, when you're creating these relationships, it's so important for you to, assert that, that respect, and that, we all have to work together and be as professional as you can be, and get that machine going, because ultimately the final product, you're all trying to make it as good as possible.
Yeah. It's not a competition. It's a collaboration.
And there are some people in our business, the artists, who like to think it's all about them. It's like, they're a singular vision, and they, it's what I think, and it's like, you realize there's all these other people in the mix, the actor, director, this guy, that we have to work well with, and the people that succeed are the people that are really good at working well with everybody. They're great collaborators, Again, I go back to like a Donald Moat type, they're people that just excel at the collaboration of the medium, which, and it's so inspiring when you see it done well, and you can turn to, again, I can turn to the greatest artist in our profession, and who pisses everybody off, and just wants to do everything their way, and they don't work well with others. And a lot of our business is just how well you work with others is how well you're going to succeed. Just yesterday, Stuart, to what you were saying, I literally had a conversation yesterday about a project that I have no part in, that somebody else, another friend of ours, is doing, and this producer was explaining it to me. They just wanted advice, called up for advice. And I saw a train wreck coming, and I'm like, and I love these guys. And I'm like, you're setting these guys up. They're setting these guys up to fail in a big way. And it's not fair because of what your initial thinking is. And I said, I just want you to know that what you're thinking is not going to work, and you're going to blame them, and it's not their fault. And so we talked for a while about, why I didn't think it would work, and what could work, and a better way to approach it maybe. And because they started getting designs and stuff from this team, and they weren't liking it. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not liking it because what you're asking not only is really difficult, near impossible, but for a lot of reasons. But these are really talented, capable guys. I've gotten called into projects to save it or to fix it because the people there that didn't do a good job. And then I got there and I'm like, these are really good people, very talented, very capable. And they were not dealing with the production. They weren't having the right conversations, and they weren't asking the right questions and seeing what the problems were. And so production immediately just pivoted, and went to somebody else who they knew would have the correct conversation. Mm-hmm. And when I came in, I was like, you need to go back. You have the right team. You just need to communicate this better, and they need to hear it the right way, and so it's almost like I brokered the conversation. So they were all on the same page, and now it's like, now go, because now it'll work, like now that you both know what the issues are. But and that's what I was trying to do yesterday,
you will feel that very keenly from having experienced it firsthand from your jobs where you were at the top of everything, where all this shit was flying at you. And it's like, that's kind of why those experiences are so important, because you could just get slapped around with these things and run away screaming and never come back, or you could, it hurts when it happens, but over time you think about these things, and then when you see it kind of happening somewhere else, you go, I recognize the shape of that shit. I know what that's all
exactly
about. And then you kind of bring it out.
And sadly, that's not the kind of information that's being taught in school.
No, I think
you can only get it.
Hard to teach it.
You can only get it through hands-on
experience. Yeah. And just being open. Being open and observant, and, it's great to just sit there, and not pay attention to anything if that's what you want to do. But if you have any gumption to like, maybe I want that guy's job, maybe I want to run a thing, then you observe, watch how things are done, watch how people who are successful do things, and then you learn from that, or that didn't go well. Ooh, why didn't that go well? And now, you learn, and again, when the stuff, it starts, the stuff starts flying, you kind of, you pull from all that, that you've seen and watched and learned, and, that's as invaluable as how good you can sculpt a wrinkle.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's like you were saying with when there's camera and other things, it's or wardrobe or something, it's like knowing a bit about what they do. So you're not just navel gazing, worry about your own thing. You maybe talk to people and ask them how's their day going, what kind of problems you're having, or you see something where you help out. I had a job a year ago. It's a job you helped me out with, Todd, where we did that makeup digitally or the live scanning digitally, and it was quite a big fat neck on the appliance. And so the costume may rub, and I hadn't met the costume department. A lot of these prosthetic things as well, you sort of hired as a freelancer to do something. So I'm not in the production from the start. I'm just brought in for a couple of weeks to do something. I do it on my workshop, and then I go in for the makeup test. And so I said, just to let you know, I started with, the neck. I sealed it really well and made sure that there was no grease paint on the neck because I didn't want to rub on the collar because I know it's a white shirt. And I just wanted to check with you about, and she was really nice. And they explained, we've made the collar a little extra, so it wasn't too tight and all this kind of thing. Right. And it was that kind of tiny little things like that. But it, how bad for me would it have been if the collar was too tight and then when he twisted it broke, and how bad for them if they'd, hired a period costume and I'd ruined it by putting makeup on it. Those tiny little things that aren't necessarily obvious, but that could be the same with camera, with sound, with all sorts of things. And I think having a genuine interest, and when you get the chance to speak to people who are willing to share, you can talk a little about how lights work or what lenses are doing this and that and the other. And so you end up with a much more rounded knowledge.
Yeah, I think even if it's not something you intend to do yourself, being able to speak the same language. This happened a lot with visual effects stuff, with my background in visual effects, being able to talk to the guys who are going to be doing digital work. Even if I'm not going to be doing the digital work, I know what's involved in making it happen. So I can talk to them to make sure that everything blends as well as possible, having a good understanding of camera and all of that stuff. Even if you're not doing it, if you speak the same language, you're good.
Well, you both hit the nail on the head, though. I mean, Stuart, you called it. It's like, but you like the thing about the collar, you probably learned that the hard way, though. You probably at some point in your career saw somebody or did it yourself, made something that you didn't coordinate with costume, and there was a problem. So with
Pax paint as well, yeah.
Yeah. You learn, this could rub off. Costumes will go get mad. They'll blame it on us. I'm going to think ahead. We'll talk to them, and you'll strike up the conversation and the relationship. I remember back in the day, people would say don't talk to the regular makeup department, or you don't have to talk to them. It's like we're a team. I may need help. We're all part of the, offer my help. It's like we're all part of the same family, and the better we all work together as a machine, the better the end result. And they you need their help sometimes, and
yeah,
absolutely completely.
And as far as VFX goes, yes, now in today's world, where the entire post-production process can go in and manipulate and change and get involved in every other department. Having that relationship is as crucial as even, you're talking to your costume designer with the neck thing. It's like if your work, is going to be interacting with another department or then taken over by another department, the better your relationship, the better that, final product is going to be, so that's crucial. Absolutely.
Which is one of the reasons I think practical shops are bringing digital in-house, because they do speak the language, and it's easier for them to just do it themselves than to try to communicate with a shop who's going to be doing this stuff in post, and they're 9 hours ahead of you or behind you time wise, or the communication gets difficult. Being able to do it, it's like what you're doing.
Yeah, it's wonderful, amazing.
Yeah,
there's a lot. When you're, having worked on a lot of projects digitally now, at a certain level of filmmaking, it almost seems beyond the capacity of what like a shop could do. It's like, it's like when you were dealing with, like I'm working on a show right now, and the plates we're ingesting from production are 8K plates. So that's one shot is an 8K, and so the amount and just the IT of the file transferring and the coordination of things, it's literally another profession. It is another entire whole industry. It's like, we got into this, we were like, oh, well, maybe we should set up a school and work with a school, to teach computer, like the digital to makeup artists. We thought that would be a great way to go, because we want to train makeup artists to be able to, work digitally. And we were told flat out by a lot of very big people saying a school is a completely different entity. Trying to open a school that does this is a completely different model, like a business model, right? That than the VFX. I would say the same for us. Practical.
Well, invariably, the
Everybody on
software
a
that you're
set,
teaching,
it's a completely different, the way they work and the way they ingest information and move things around and, transfer this and the naming conventions. And then, I defy any, effects house coordinators and everything to try to get involved in the naming conventions of VFX plates and transferring things back and forth. It is beyond mind-boggling, unless
it's a lot of proprietary stuff involved too.
Unbelievable. Everybody you work with is different, and they all handle things differently. And we're working with everybody, like the biggest companies and studios, and it's teams of people to do things that we have never dealt with in our lives, that seem like I can't even wrap my head around why this person's doing that. And when you see the credits and you see the thousands of names go by at the end, you realize it's like, it's a whole different animal. And so for years, like when Stan tried to get into it, and tried to have his digital, in-house set up, and Aaron tried so valiantly to get that going, and then eventually just went off and started his own visual effects company. Because he kind of had to, because it was just so hard to do both. Like near impossible. So you can do, it's like, I've met a lot of makeup effects guys, they go, oh yeah, like Joran Lundstrom, who's just as talented as they come, right? And Joran does a lot of his digital work. He'll tell production, he goes, look, if there's any cleanup or any digital work, I'll do it, which is great. He makes it in his deal. They'll send him the, whatever the footage is on his movies, and he'll do it in After Effects or, something. But when you're dealing with 4K, 6K, 8K plates, you can't do After Effects. You can't do, you're in like Flame or Nuke. A Flame machine is like $80,000,
just to start.
Yeah, exactly. And to work in Nuke, you have a $10,000 license, just to operate it, which is a monthly thing, and it's, it's crazy the scale that you have to jump up to start doing that, and the time it takes to do that, so that's why I had to, just create another entity to start doing that kind of stuff. It's all encompassing,
But that again is what is your response to, you dip a toe into it, you try and see, you swill it around, you surround yourself with all of the problems, you're met with all of these negative responses for people. You go around, you muse it and go, well, I'm going to go this way then. I'm going to take what I know you guys have a problem with, and I'm going to do it differently because
and you saw the need for it.
I can't work with that. But I know it can be done, so I'm going to do it, and I'm going to prove to you it can be done by doing it rather than.
And I love when I hear guys like Joran said that. I was like, that's amazing, and that's what you want. That's unbelievable. That's so great to have ownership and control over our work. That's my biggest problem. My biggest problem, and the reason I started doing it, is I couldn't stand seeing movies where you saw all this crazy digital work and it was just either not good or worse, ruined stuff that we did, and it was just happening more and more and becoming more and more prevalent. And every movie now, does it. And, you just got a bunch of people that are as talented as they may be. They're not makeup people, they're not effects people like us. They don't see what we see. They don't have the eye we have. They don't have the subtlety or the just the capacity to do what needs to be done and not what needs to be done. They just don't have that. So they'll go in and just do stuff, they're like the editors pointing out or the director pointed out, or, and it would just frustrate the hell out of me. And people started coming to me, like actors would come to me and directors like, did you do that stuff? And I'm like, no, I had nothing to do. Why would they ask me? How silly. The one person who knows what it should look like. And we've never ever been, talked to about that stuff. So that's when I just said, you know what, I'm gonna start getting involved in that kind of stuff, and offering an alternative option, because there are companies that specialize in it and they say, this is what we do. We do cosmetic work and everything. It's great. Not one single makeup person working for them. It's like, I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you say you're going to do this job when, I have 40 years of experience staring at a face, and looking at how the light interacts with that face, how the colors change with different light, and and beyond that, what's the conceptual, decisions behind why I did that, and why I did that. It's like, what was the artist trying to say in this scene? What's the continuity of the character? What's happening? It's like, does that digital guy who's never been on set, who has nothing to do with this production, does that guy know, or she know, what that artist was trying to achieve with his character and his actor? And it's impossible. They were never in a million years. I don't care how good they are. They're never going to know what that process was happening there. The subtlety of things that I do on a makeup, from one shot to another, for a character, like the character's getting up in the morning to when he goes to work, the little things that we do, they don't know that. There's no way for them to know that. The only person that knows that is those people. So my thinking was, let's bring that person into the mix. Let's get the right from the horse's mouth. Let's try to involve, just like the DP should be the only one who's, overseeing the color timing at the end of the movie, the whole DI process. The DP is the one who designs the overall look of the film, the lighting and the mood and the camera of the film. It's like, used to be when they first started the DI and the color timing and everything, the DP was nowhere to be seen. He was not part of that process. They fought.
Which makes no sense.
It's beyond no sense. And so the directors of photography and the cinematography, guild had to fight to get into that process, and now it is the DP who oversees that. It's in the budget. He's on, call. He's that couple of weeks. He's the one going through all the shots. How can you possibly go in and change a bunch of makeup stuff and not consult with the makeup people or the hair people? It's beyond my,
I often wondered about that when they, with post-production, when they're grading stuff, when they change the colors of things, and, without meaning to, but, you got lip colors and stuff that might be very specifically chosen for the period or something. And then they're completely changed by the act of grading the film. So now their lighting matches, well done, but now that's the wrong shade.
And they don't see it. They don't care. They don't, not aware of it. Oh, I didn't even see that. You bring it to their attention. So I go back to the very first conversation we had. It's that communication in the beginning where you set the stage and you have those conversations where you tell them how important what you do is, why it's important, and it's important right to the end. It's as important in pre-production, where we're designing and coming up with the characters and their looks and their continuity and their arc, whatever that may be. I don't care if it's a a guy who gets sick and then gets healthy, or if it's a ogre or a demon or whatever, zombies. It's, we think that shit out like so, minutely, and it should carry through all the way to the very end. So, if there's post-production work, being done, let us be involved. Let us make sure we're the ones who make sure that it's dialed in and it's the integrity of it is consistent, right? So that's
the way it's supposed to look.
Yeah. So and I start that every show with that conversation and that argument. And, and again, it was like through years of experience and watching it done badly or without that. And finally just, can't take it anymore. And I just, I stuck my hand up in the meetings and I said, I would like to be involved. I just think, the visual effect guy's going off like a mile a minute, and we'll do this and we'll do that. And it was literally on a show where there was a gangland, like drugs and murders and killings and all sorts of shit. And everything that involved blood and an effect was going to be post. Everything that we would have done, like all the makeup effects, gags and this and that and everything, all gone, right? All taken out of, all my notes gone, all digital. And I just got halfway through the production meeting. I'm losing my mind. Slit throat. Okay, we'll take it. We'll do it. We'll take care of it. It's like, this is so mad. Guy's going to get stabbed. We'll do that. He's shot. We'll do that. It's like, okay. Finally, I was just like, something? Some of this stuff we could do on set really quickly and easily, and it'll look great. And if you are going to do it digitally, please, let's have a conversation, a sidebar, and let's talk. And I'd like to be involved in that stuff because I think I can help. And luckily for me, that particular job, the VFX supervisor was so impressed. And once he saw what I was doing, he was so complimentary and loved the idea of collaborating, that when the time eventually came and we got together and I went and started helping them, and he started giving me more and more and more, and we started doing stuff in post, the director lost his mind. He was like, this stuff looks fantastic. Let's do this. Started adding stuff. And it was amazing. And that's where I got bit by the bug. And I was like, this is great. Like, this is what it should be, and I've heard stories of other people doing it, same, like Joel Harlow did it on The Lone Ranger, the same thing, like, with certain effects and characters, like he knew when he did the wooden Indian makeup on Johnny Depp, that like bookends the movie, I think. Johnny, once you put the makeup on him, Johnny was not as svelte as he wanted the wooden Indian to look. And so Joel, made a big point of getting with production and saying, look, and the director, Gore Verbinski, and was like, I really want to be involved digitally, and I'll show you, here's going to be the practical, but here's what it can look like if we can digitally augment it and enhance it. And he was all for it. And they were like, this is great. And so Joel worked really closely and supervised all the post-production, cleanup and sweetening of it. And he did stuff like, he worked on the eyes, and they did all this cool stuff to it. And they were both nominated for Oscars. And I remember being at the nominees luncheon with the VFX guy and Joel. And I go like, see, this is how it works. Like, this is how it should be. This is the perfect way, example of a collaboration that paid off.
Absolutely. Yeah,
they didn't win, but
no, but it was the right.
They both were, that they did it right, and they got acknowledged by their peers, which was great.
because like you say, even though the costume maybe or the makeup is going to be reduced or modified, it's all the lights in the right place, the interactions are all there. You get so much stuff for free that you don't have to guess, and then you've got now more capacity to do the visual effects stuff. And it's like, if you can do it practically, and like you say, it needs someone to know, I know what the visual effects are going to have to do, and we've seen the visual effects and I know how to do it practically. And so you can, fight the course for that particular effect. And
some of the best visual effects people, as we know, came from practical. Like, they learned how to do things and make things, and now they're into VFX. And they, I always point to Gino Acevedo. He's my go-to, and I'll say, like, the reason why Weta stuff looks so good is because of Gino. Now I'm sure there's amazing
Caesar Deco is another one.
And I go, but when Gino went there, because I'll never forget being at Steve's shop, and young, squeaky clean Richard Taylor came by, 20 some odd, 2 years old or whatever, saying, we're gonna start Lord of the Rings, and we're looking for people, because they had nobody at the time, and we're gonna bring over some US effects people to help train, some New Zealanders, and and he gave us what the offer was, and here's the deal, and it's not much money, but you got to put yourselves up, but you're gonna do it because you love Lord of the Rings. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know if I love Lord of the Rings that much, and it was for 1 year. Right. And so Gino thought about it, and he decided to go. And a couple of other guys from our shop went. It was guaranteed money, guaranteed work for a year, and so they went, and of course never came back. Never came back. But you look at some of their work, and you hear the stories and how they were struggling to come up with certain things. And you've got somebody at the caliber that Gino was, and he stepped in, like they were having digitally problems with Gollum. And so, they're looking at Gino stuff, and they're like, how did you do that? And how did you get that translucency? And he's like, well, you just gotta, and he like sat him down, and they gave him the tablet, which he'd never had a tablet in his hands before. And they're showing him how to use it, and he just started showing him how to do what he was doing. And all of a sudden, like, everything starts getting better and looking better. And, again, it's that knowledge that we have, and what I always say, it's like, if again, working together, when we all work together, that collaboration there's nothing better than that. When you can pool all those minds, you get the greatest digital artists, but if you look at, even on Instagram, like we do, and you go look at some of these guys who are sculpting, and the digital work is like just beyond excellent, if you go back in their feed, sometimes they'll post a real sculpture. They'll post some maquettes that they did and they're real stuff. And you're like, okay, this guy's practical. Like he knows how to do it practical. He's not just all about pixels, you know, and it's just, that's important.
I remember seeing a Chris Costa sculptors a while ago, and I messaged him about it, and he'd done like a rough out of a sculpt, but then he'd also popped it onto a sculpting. It was all digital, and he's popped it onto a sculpting stand with a pipe and everything to make it look like it was clay. I was like, Chris, he knows how to sculpt.
Chris is one of those guys. He's just fucking beyond. And I talk to him all the time, and we've worked together on projects, and exactly. He's just one of those guys. It's like, it's beyond phenomenal, you know.
Chris is one of the guys that I need to get a new release signed for.
Oh, no. I'm sure
you want to get that in that book, definitely.
Yeah.
Could I ask you, with regards to the digital side of things? So people at college, so here's the thing, like if you want to learn how to do makeups and stuff at makeup school, you know, we got a long history of how that's been done and how it's been taught, and it varies from place to place, but there's a big body of education, you know, of knowledge to draw on. There's not that many people that know about it, the digital side of things, because as well, it's changing all the time. I mean, digital's been around a while, but it's always advancing. Could you, and it may be unfair of me to put this on you, but could you sort of sum up a few things what do you think makeup artists in training should know about digital and digital makeup, just so they could start their own research and be looking in the right places so that they're not completely ignorant of these things if their schools aren't able to teach them this?
Yeah, you know, for me, because I'm, you know, I finally figured out how to turn on a computer and work it. But, you know, like a lot of us, I started in, you know, Photoshop, you know, and I learned Photoshop, you know, and I never took a proper course, you know, I just kind of played with it and played with it. I remember Rick saying, I don't have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just you know, I do like 6 things over and over again. And so slowly but surely over the years, you know, I've just gotten really good at Photoshop. That has served me so well digitally, because now when I look at things, I understand, you know, the thought process behind, you know, how work is done digitally. And, you know, it almost is like moving Photoshop, you know, like when I've sat with a digital artist and they show me how they're doing things, conceptually, it all makes sense to me. I may not understand the steps, you know, like I took a class. I remember Joel Harlow and I took a class for ZBrush, and he, at the time, ZBrush wasn't available for a Mac, and I only had Macs. Joel went out and bought like a cheap PC just to do ZBrush on, just so he could go home and practice. So he had, our classes were on Saturdays, and so I was, you know, he was way ahead of me, because he would go home and just practice all week long on what he learned, and then I'd come in the next Saturday and he'd be like showing me stuff. I'm like, you bastard. And so I was writing my notes, and, you know, I'm trying to do it, and I'm still like, how do I fucking make it?
Can you remember who the teacher was?
This was at Studio Arts in LA. And it was great. But I couldn't, the fact that I couldn't practice was driving me crazy. After the class ended, they finally came out with a beta, you know, for a Mac. And I got it. And then at that point, so much of it had gone out of my head. I tried to play with it. It was still tricky. You had to partition your drive, and it was still a little weird. And I got caught up in that, in all of that. And I never continued pursuing it. And then, of course, every time I saw Rick after that, he's like, no, you gotta do more of it. You gotta get on there and play with it. Then it became time. Like, I don't have the time to now sit there and, you know, just be in ZBrush and playing with ZBrush, especially then you see what other guys are doing with it. And you're like, okay, I'll just throw my pen up in the air. But Joel, you know, eventually I went to visit him on Black Panther, and he had a Cintiq palette, you know, like a small Cintiq, and he was doing all his ZBrush. That's the only reason he had the Cintiq, was just so he could be in the trailer or on set and playing with ZBrush. And I thought, well, that's kind of clever. So then I got a Cintiq, but it was still like, you know, it's PC based. So, you know, my Mac mind was still fighting, you know, just turning it on and, you know, opening it up, and, you know, so I haven't done as much of that. I wish I'd had, because that 3D modeling aspect probably would help me more in because all of our work we do digitally is on Nuke. And I have an IT guy that works for us who's going to teach me Nuke, because
That's in the node based, right?
Yeah, and so much of it makes me think of Photoshop. Like when I look at certain things, like, and so he's going to try to slowly but surely train me, because I get frustrated sometimes looking at shots. I just want to be able to go in there and do something. It's like that one thing we see. It's like I just want to fix that one little thing. And if I don't have the person who's good at that, just going in and touching something up real quick, I would love the capacity to do it. So I'm going to learn it. So the problem is, to learn Nuke, which is what we use, it's not the same as like learning After Effects. It's like you can't,
it's a tougher learning curve.
Yeah, it's a much higher learning curve. Like cinema makeup school has a digital makeup class, and I think it's like After Effects they use, or something similar. And it's a much simpler, learning curve.
There's sure an awful lot you can do with After Effects. After Effects, next to ZBrush, which has become my favorite software, After Effects I've been in love with it for years.
But I think anything that we learn digitally, whether it's ZBrush or Photoshop or After Effects or anything, you just start learning certain processes that carry over, even if it's on a much higher platform. The theology behind it is the same. You start to have a conversation and understand what somebody's saying, even if you don't understand the mechanics of it. Like somebody could talk to me about ZBrush and I'll be like, like I'll glaze over, but I get it.
Yeah.
I just may not know the steps to do it, but I can appreciate, what they're doing.
Yeah, I think it would be good for maybe makeup students to research and look into how photo retouching is done for magazine covers and things, just so they can see how they do it. Like that, there'll be videos on how that's done.
And honestly, that, again, Photoshop and photo retouching has made me a better makeup artist. I mean,
just you can previs things in Photoshop relatively simply.
Yeah, I look at things differently now, and I mean, in the old days, I used to just take a Polaroid of somebody and I'd go and I'd sketch over the Polaroid. Now I do, every movie I do, I conceptualize all the characters in Photoshop, and I do all my designs in Photoshop, and I present them to the director and the actors and get everybody, involved and make changes, and I do all my makeup tests in Photoshop initially, and how much time and energy does that and money does that save? And then go from there, and then we'll build something based on what's been approved. So the better you are at that, it just, it's such a huge help.
Absolutely. Stuart and I've talked about what you can do in ZBrush, that you with the layer function, you can mock up 2 or 3 different makeup designs in probably less time than it would take you to physically sculpt in clay one idea, and show production sign off on that. And then you've already got a digital version of it. If you need to sculpt it practically, you've already got it to look at.
Yeah. And there are guys doing that. There are a lot of guys who are doing that now. Kazu's doing that. Arian's doing it. There's a ton of guys that are shops that are getting more and more into that, and obviously there are a lot of effects guys out there. My buddy Scott Patton, Scott's such a brilliant sculptor, makeup artist, effects guy, and now just a beyond brilliant ZBrush artist. Everything Stan Legacy does, Scott's, probably had his hands on or ZBrush sculpted. And, it's just phenomenal, and like you said, if you could scan in a life cast of an actor and then just start sculpting stuff on it, like that I would love to learn. But again, it's just, I need the time to sit and, if I was younger now and I didn't have the family and all the responsibilities and the jobs, I would be all in that. That's all I'd be doing.
And the costs of stuff are coming down. I just picked up a Revo Point Pop 2 scanner recently. It's a little handheld thing. It was, it retails for like $700, and they gave me a really good deal on it because I'm using it for the book.
Yeah. Well, again, it's like,
holy crap, the accuracy and the detail is as good as scanners that cost, 10 times as much.
Well, that's just it. I mean, what, 5 years ago it was $10,000, and now it's I remember when the first color Xerox printer came out.
Yeah.
And you're like,
Sadly, I do.
Color Xerox, and it's like you could actually print something in color, and it's like they're like $22,000. Oh, one day, and
the size of your car
dropped. And then it was like the day that you could actually physically own one for however many hundreds of $1,000. Like everything seemed to be at that. And when it got to the $1,000 price point, the Laserdisc player, the DVD player, it's like that seemed to be like gettable for some reason. Like even though at the time it was like saving up a lot of money, but when I got my first Xerox printer for like $1,000, I was so like I'd finally hit the big time. I could print my own stuff. It was amazing. Yeah. And now, like the big screen TVs, like, a few years ago when we got like, we moved into the house and I wanted to get a giant flat panel, TV for the wall. And, and I was like, and the price point was literally, I like 75-inch TV was like $4,500 or $5,000, depending on how nice it was. The 80-inch, 5 inches more, was $18,000. Like the technology to go from here to here was just, I guess they didn't figure it out. Now I can go to Costco and I can get an 85-inch TV for $2,200, $1,800. I'm like, that looks amazing. And you're like,
yeah,
it's amazing. A couple of years go by and, it's all going to be within our grasp, So yes, learning the technology is, I think, if you're a younger person coming up, it's imperative.
Well, I think ZBrush is, from a sculpting point of view, ZBrush is very affordable. Then they do like a free version, a lower version, and the Photoshop thing. I think the Photoshop thing is excellent. I've done a fair bit of paint design for things over the last couple of years, and I found using Photoshop. So I bought a Cintiq primarily for ZBrush, but I found it really useful for the painting. But then I got like an iPad Pro with Procreate.
Yeah.
And I found that nicer because you can kind of work at different angles.
Yeah.
Cintiq is quite, you have to work like this. And what I found really nice is you can do your colors in different layers. And it's made me disciplined about naming my layers and making duplicates and then grouping them together. And then again, you're thinking about it, or I do, thinking about it in a makeup point of view, like I'm layering on colors and what happens if the red's underneath the blues and I can fade these out. So even though it's Photoshop and it's technology, you're treating it like makeup. And I think that's very good, because then you're not going to do anything that you can't replicate in colors because you're thinking
that's the number one thing I tell every production and actor and director I work with. It's like, I will not, I'll never forget, years ago, I did this movie called Lemony Snicket, Series of Unfortunate Events. And 2 days before we were supposed to go, I designed everything in Photoshop. I built a ton of stuff. This is 4 months of conceptual testing and makeup testing. And this is, now we've got all the characters in the movie. We start shooting tomorrow. And I get called into the producer's trailer, Walter Parks. Walter says, so the Sherry Lansing, who's the head of the studio, finally saw the makeup test that we had done 4 months prior, and that was signed off on by everybody, Steven Spielberg, everybody. And Sherry saw the test and she's freaking out because she can't tell it looks like Jim Carrey, and she thinks the makeup needs to be redesigned. We start shooting tomorrow. And he goes, can you go Photoshop some other looks? And I said, sure. I said, but I can Photoshop the world, but we're not going to have that tomorrow. It doesn't mean we're going to have that makeup. Now, I have a lot of makeups and I can change it, which then is another story I've said. But, I'm explicit in the beginning of every show. And when I have the conversation, I say, look, as a makeup artist, I'm really good at conceptualizing in Photoshop. I will not conceptualize or show you anything that I cannot practically make. And I'll literally show you a makeup that I've done and the Photoshop design, and I guarantee you they'll look one and the same. Like, I know if I do it in Photoshop, I know I can replicate that, and it's so easy in Photoshop to I'll just make the nose skinnier. I'll do this. I'll make in the old days when I was drawing, you'd make your model look cooler, more dynamic, in a drawing, and with Photoshop, when you've got a face and you're working with an actor, and you're building stuff on top of them, you're like, I know what my limitations are. I know I can sculpt and I can add clay and I can do this. And I know I can't, I could tweak it and make it look cooler, but I can't make that. So I'm never going to show them something that I can't make and physically reproduce exactly. And that's the genius of being able to do that program, myself. You give it to a conceptual artist, you go to any one of the shops and they have all these conceptual artists that are geniuses and they'll design something, but you may not be able to make it. You may not be able to translate it perfectly. I know for a fact I can. So that's the importance of being able to know that software and being able to use it. And Stuart, I'm like you. I got that iPad Pro. I waiting until they came up with Photoshop for it, and Procreate's phenomenal. And I sit on set and I'm working on makeups and overlaying stuff and manipulating stuff and playing with stuff. And now they've got all the 3D modeling programs on there too, and I was doing a 3D program and I was sculpting with it. And Jim Carrey's looking over my head. He goes, "What the hell is that?" He goes, "I want to get that." And he's like, get me an iPad, get me that software. He wanted to do it too. It was, so it's getting so cool and so much more fun, and then you have the time. Now I can sit on set and play, and work on stuff.
Yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with digital world. One, because we rely on it. I hate it because we rely on it for so much.
Yeah.
But I love it because it's made life so much easier and efficient. Being able to do Photoshop and take a scan of an actor's head and design a makeup in ZBrush is extraordinary.
Yeah. Look, that's it. Technology waits for no man, right? I mean, we could still be back with horses and carriages, but we're not. And so you see where it's going, and we either jump on the bandwagon. I can't tell you how many amazing set photographers that I knew that retired when the digital camera, became adopted by all the studios and they wanted all their film digital. Yeah. And these all old school, photographers were amazing. Are like, I'm not getting into that stuff.
Yeah, I remember that. And now no one remembers those those things anymore.
Dark rooms are going the way of the dodo.
I mean, think about this conversation that the next generation of the three of us will be having, and makeup will be, who knows how much of it'll be digital or something else, what AI, virtual reality, augmented reality, will be. I mean, because we're getting into that stuff now as well, in the virtual space, and I'm part of the SciTech Council at the Academy, and every conversation we get on turns towards virtual production, and and like, how can we do things more virtually in the cloud and this and that, and you're like, it's and makeup's already being done, and just the software out there, the artificial human software, and you can take this artificial human and you can change it to this person, this gender, this nationality, this size, you're like, oh my God, it's like Mr.
The deep fake technology is going crazy.
And so that's, that future, like, because that's where we're going. Like, all that technology is now coming at us, and becoming easier to use and cheaper. And the amount of memory it takes is being figured out. And it used to be like, again, like the old Xerox, it used to be like, oh, it's so overwhelming, now it's just getting, smaller and easier to do. You couldn't do deep fake like 2 years ago on a film, because it wasn't, the resolution wasn't there. And it wasn't, it's like all these guys online, like, you deep fake, look how much better it is. It's like, but you can't do that in 4K. It just looks like what it is. It's just it's a fuzzy cheat, but now, they're up-resing and they're figuring out how to do it, and now you've got, Luke Skywalker walking around, you're like, that's awesome, but that couldn't be done, they, a couple of years ago, they saw a need and they figured out that this technology could work. And then they just, it's like Steve used to say, just, put a man on it, just put a man on it and have him figure it out. And that's what they did, and so, the future of our technology is just expanding, like we see a need and they start figuring it out. How do we do digital water? I don't know, get some people on it. And, now they're companies and they figured out digital water. They figured out digital hair, like all the shit that like a decade ago was so hard. I don't know if we'll ever be able to figure this out. Like now it's like, now there's just a software, you just press the button and it does it,
Yeah. And also with things like iPads and stuff and things becoming more consumer accessible, you're going to see a lot more people who find they have an aptitude for it, showing everyone how they do it,
People making
they
movies
wouldn't have
on
done 20
iPhones.
years ago.
That's where the deepfake came from, right? It came from all these, independent guys who just started, doing this stuff and coming up with this crazy, weird software. It was free. It was just out there that they just, and conceptualizing stuff. I think that's one of the things that Mac did. I thought that was very clever, is that when they beta test something, they just send it out to everybody and just see what people come up with, and open source stuff. And, it's amazing. And so it just keeps growing and growing and growing. So, it's like, if you ask, the 20-year-old version of you, if you could have comprehended what we're doing now, it's like, no, couldn't have even comprehended, so now go 20 years, or 30 years, what is it going to be? We can't even comprehend what they're going to be doing. And at this rate, it's going to be amazing. So all we can do is be the ones who try to stay ahead of the curve, and like, then when stuff is going on, try to get involved and be part of it and, help make those changes. And I don't want to get left behind is my thinking. It's like, I don't want to be a stop motion animator. I don't want to be a creature effects guy who's now out of a job. I don't want to be like, somebody who's just, I don't want to be the still photographer who didn't adapt to digital. It's like, I want to be in front of that train, on the train or at the front of it. Yeah. So,
yeah, you're on that train and all the luggage you have from the past is absolutely useful in it. That's the thing. Yeah. You're taking that luggage with you.
Will make it great. Right. Yeah. I mean, I love having these conversations. I mean, I do. I mean, depending on who listens to it, again, you help one person, point them in the right direction. You've done a good job. So there's so many of us who have, remember decades ago when, nobody shared knowledge and, it was kind of closed off and, people wouldn't tell you what they were doing. I love that. God bless Dick Smith, that our generation is so open, is so willing to help somebody out. I mean, I have no problem calling anybody and asking a question and getting an answer usually. And I'd be the same, it's just, I love that about what our industry's become, because when you hear the stories of what it used to be, it's just amazing to me, I think we'd be much farther along.
Totally.
Oh, definitely.
If they were that open, back in the day,
Yeah.
So it's cool. That's why I think ours is expanding so greatly, is that everybody's been so gracious with information and with knowledge and paying it forward and, and the podcasts and the interviews and the this and that. And it's like, they didn't have that when we started, it's like, I remember getting like the Making of King Kong book and you'd read about Rick Baker, or Starlog, or, that was it. Like, that was all we had.
That was it. Yeah. I remember reading through the Caglione and Drexler Effects Lab, and they were showing you around their workshop. And I was like, with a magnifying glass, looking at their bench and, all this stuff. But that hasn't gone away, that desire. That's why we do this podcast, because we love it so much. We get to have these little conversations and dig deep, and it fires me up just like it did 30 years ago. So
yeah, no, it is. We're so lucky to be of that mindset. Again, that, we got into something when we were young and we just got captivated by it and we loved it and we just stuck with it. So many people lose that. I can't, what's really cool is I've come across people who had what we all had, and then got diverted or didn't feel like they had the opportunity, or, they didn't have the luck, or they just went a different direction, but they've still kind of got it. My favorite is on Deadpool 2, sitting there in the makeup trailer, and I was sketching up, I was photoshopping up like a tattoo design for this actor, and the actor comes in, and And he sits down. I'm like, hey, you know, I introduce myself, and I think you're great, and I love you. And it was Terry Crews, right? Black, you know, actor, and very funny and personality, and all the Eddie Murphy movies, you know, and American Idol and whatever, and a pro football player, used to be a pro, you know, linebacker or whatever he was, you know, big guy, right? And just lovely, real personable, and we're talking, and he says to me at one point, I showed him the sketch, and he's like, "Oh man, that's so cool," you know, and he goes, "Did he say like?" He goes, "You know, I love this stuff." He goes, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a makeup effects artist. And I go, "Really?" I go, "Wow." And he goes, "Dude," he goes, "I know everything." He goes, I know everything about Dick Smith. I know everything about Rick Baker. He goes, "Man," he goes, "I started out, and I was an artist, and I drew, and I was like, you know, like really getting into it." Like he just, like, all of a sudden a floodgate opened, you know, and I'm like, my brain is like, I'm like, I can't even comprehend what he's saying, you know, because I'm like, this is so not the person that I would ever think, you know. And he was like, "No, man," he goes, I was so into it." He goes, "But, you know, like, my dad, you know, he put me in the sports, and then I got big, and I became a football kid." And he goes, "And it just never happened for me." He goes, "But I've always loved it." And I goes, "I always appreciate it. And like, anytime I get near somebody who does it," he goes, "Do you know Margaret Becerra?" And I go, "Of course I know Margaret Becerra." He goes, "Man, I worked on some, Margaret Becerra was there, and I was asking her all these questions about the thing." And like, it was amazing. Like, he literally was like a total geeky fanboy, and then showed me, he goes, "Yeah," he goes, "I still draw, you know." And he showed me portraits he'd done of all the football players that he worked with, like the most beautiful pencil portrait you could think of. And if you go on his Instagram, on Terry's Instagram, and you go back through his Instagram, you know, in between all the shots where he's posing and you know, these shots, you'll come across a sketch. He'll throw in a sketch once in a while of something he drew. And it's just like, oh my God, like, this guy's super talented. And he just didn't go this way, you know, but he could very easily, you know, be sitting here talking to us, you know. He's just that guy. And, you know, and the guys who were, you know, as Rick and everybody would say, like the monster kids who grew up loving, you know, what we all love. We just went the artistic route, but, you know, the Benicio del Toro, you know, I got into this super long conversation about famous monsters and The Creature from the Black Lagoon, and, you know, with Benicio, and the reason why he did the Wolfman. Like, he loves it. I went into his house, and he's got a giant 6-sheet poster of The Creature from the Black Lagoon on his wall, like this gorgeous, you know, like lobby sheet, you know, that's amazing. And I was like, damn, that's awesome, you know. And so many of them, you know, that's for me what that's exciting, you know, like when you meet other people who just like us and then just went off a different way, you know. And I, you know, you get them on Instagram once in a while, and I don't do Twitter or Facebook or anything, but Instagram, somebody will message me, and, you know, like they'll say, you know, "I've always loved this and I've been really into it." And then you look them up, and they're a doctor, or they're like, you know, man,
it's so true. Is that when Todd and I went to see Maddie Scott Spencer? She's the ZBrush queen, and she's just, we're in her place, and she was talking about, she had Monster Club poster on the wall, and she was talking about all these makeup artists, and I didn't know this about her, and I was like, oh my God. And she was just old school practical, who picked up ZBrush, was really good at it, and now, you know, is amazing at ZBrush, but she still likes to make
if
stuff.
You want to learn ZBrush, take her Intro to ZBrush course from Nauman School.
What's her name?
Maddie Scott
Spencer.
Yeah.
Text, send it to me. Email.
I will. Yeah, she
told
incredible.
me, I was the same. I've been nibbling at ZBrush for about 8 years. And then Todd mentioned her, and checked it out, and I was like, oh my God. Because sometimes you go to a lot of places, and they'll say stuff really quickly, and you don't know what the words are. But she's not like that. She's very slow, very calm.
Yeah. It's all about finding the right teacher.
Yeah,
you know
she's a good one.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. It's really fun. I mean, and you know, when we can share, again, the love of what we do, and people just come out of the woodwork sometimes.
I love seeing those light bulbs go on over people's heads, you know, getting excited about the stuff that excites me. That floats my boat.
Yeah, cool, guys. Well, keep it up, you know, keep doing it. It's great.
Let's wind this up. This has been a long episode. Thank you for listening. If you made it to the end, well done. good stuff. Oh, I know I was going to tell you. I was going to play you this. We had a voice message.
Somebody got on the website and left us a message.
They did. Let me just
Awesome.
find you. Well, we have our Speak Pipe, which is an app on our website, and basically you can leave us a voice message. I've just got to find it on here, and I've checked with her. She's happy for us to put some of this into the podcast, some of the audio.
Hi, Stuart. Hi, Todd. I wanted to thank you so much for your amazing podcasts. I've been binge listening during the seaming process of 15-foot dinosaurs. I started off in makeup effects, and now I work in animatronics. I was doing a prosthetic nose, and one of your podcasts really solved some issues for me. One of them was cutting edges. Another was working in layers, both acetone superbaldies and isopropyl, and it got me out of a pickle. Anyways, I also wanted to say hi, Todd. I met you years ago at the Effects Lab dinner with Joe Lester, and off and on throughout the years through IMATS and Monster Palooza. So I just wanted to say hi, and I just wanted to thank both of you for such an amazing job. I thoroughly enjoy the show. I hope everybody's doing well and have some future wonderful shows for us. Bye.
How cool is that?
Oh man, that just made my day.
That's awesome, isn't it?
I thought her name sounded familiar. Yeah, I remember her.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it brought up some good memories. That I remember that dinner. And I miss Joe Lester.
Oh man.
He was a good guy.
Yeah.
Met some wonderful people through the Effects Lab website.
Yeah, that kind of started it all, didn't it? Before there were Facebook groups and stuff.
Yeah.
That
Joe was one of the founders of that.
Yeah. It's pretty forward thinking. And, it's that kind of thing that, sharing stuff and making sure that there's a forum for people to discuss these things is a big deal. It matters.
Yeah.
Because otherwise,
thanks for that lovely message, Stephanie. Much appreciated.
It's cool, isn't it? So nice. So we do get messages from time. The weird thing is, like, a lot of them are like they're very specific things about something, and I don't necessarily want to drag it into the podcast because we can't hinge it around stuff. So we do get a lot of requesty things and emails, particularly, which I always say, email in, and we do, but I like to make stuff relevant to the podcast and put things in it. But because it's been a couple of months since the last one, I just haven't got around to doing any of those publicly. I respond to them privately, and I'm sure I see you do that too, but it's just one of those things where it's like trying to include it into the audio of the podcast sometimes is a bit tricky. But yeah, if you come to our website battleswithbitsofrubber.com, you'll see a little tab on there. You can just leave a voice message if you want to do that, and if you're happy for us to use it in the show, then please. I did check with Stephanie before putting it on, but I'll trim it up and put it out. But you can always email us as well, stuartandtodd@gmail.com.
We welcome your queries and comments.
All right, cheers guys. Cheers Todd.
Cheers Stu.
Cheers man, take care.
Talk to you later. Cheers.
You can get in touch through our Facebook page or email us at stuartandtodd@gmail.com. Check the show notes for more information. If you enjoyed this episode, tell someone else and help us grow by sharing it on social media. Thanks for listening.